Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jerry Blatt, and I'm the manager of the Peaks Island Branch Library, part of the Portland Public Library System. Tonight, we're delighted to be hosting Kate Kennedy and fellow Islander, Eleanor Morse, in Life Even So, Living Through a Health Trauma. In 2016, writer Kate Kennedy suffered a life-threatening bout of facial melanoma. Her book, Skin, a Memoir, rose up from that time. In this hour-long Zoom talk and reading, Kate and longtime friend and writing comrade, novelist Eleanor Morse, will explore how books come to be, how nature can heal, and how old friendships, as well as new unexpected ones, can bring joy. Kate is the author of the novel End Over End, 2 editions of short biographies entitled Maine's Remarkable Women, and many short pieces of fiction and nonfiction. Kate has taught writing at Portland High School, USM, and the University of Maine, and later became director of the Southern Maine Writing Project. She lives in Cape Elizabeth. Eleanor Morse has 3 novels out in the world, with a 4th, Marguerite's Harbor, coming out in April. Her novel, An Unexpected Forest, won an Independent Book Publishers Award for Best Regional Fiction and the 2008 Maine Literary Award for Best Published Fiction. White Dog Fell from the Sky was a Publisher's Weekly Pick of the Week. Eleanor received a Master's of Arts in Teaching from Yale University and an MFA in Writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. She lives on Peaks Island and is on the faculty of Spalding University School of Creative and Professional Writing in Louisville, Kentucky. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kate and Eleanor.
Thank you. Is it my turn, Eleanor? I think it is. Yeah. I just would like to thank some people. So many of you, in fact, all of you who are here deserve many thanks. First of all, Jim and Agnes Bichelle, the publishers of Skin. And Agnes has been a longtime writing friend and inspirer who has a book just out with Literal Books called The Oracle Pool. So do look for that. Thanks to Lori Harley, the book designer. Some of you heard us earlier talking about that. I also would like to thank my family near and far who have been such wonderful, stalwart and kind people when I was going through this experience. Although some of you, I didn't really write about it, felt like overstepping a line a bit. Some of you, I brought you into the pages more. Thanks to all of you and to my doctors and nurses and techs and support staff for your amazing skill and kindness. So that's enough of that. Thank you. And Eleanor, oh my gosh. Eleanor, thank you very, very much for offering to do this, wanting to do this, and being all a friend could want, writer and person. Thank you.
Okay. So I just a quick roadmap for what we're going to do this hour. I'll do a real quick introduction, and then Kate will read a little from her book, and then we'll talk back and forth. And at about 7:45, we'll open it up for chat questions. And if you've come from a faraway place, maybe just greet us with where you're from too. So that would be interesting to know who's from where. So quick introduction. If you haven't already read Skin, a memoir, I hope you'll get a chance to soon. It's really a gorgeous book, powerful, funny, wonderfully written, and a strong testament to life. I read it again this week and was struck again by the lively intellect and the pages and the imagination and the glorious descriptions, the way it just makes meaning of the world. I happened to run into something this week as well in a book called Stranger Faces by Namwali Serpell, and she writes, unruly faces are especially intriguing because they invite viewers to sever ties with the placidity of an ideal. Kate writes this harrowing experience with honesty, utter honesty, and the unruly face is plain to see in this book. She doesn't strive toward being a hero in her own life or a heroine in her own life. She's simply, in these pages, as she is in real life, gloriously human, with foibles and desires and all that makes us human. Kate, I think you're going to read a little now.
I would like to just read you from the first chronological moment in this book. It's not the exact beginning, but just to sort of place this experience of melanoma and just give you a little insight into some of the characters, namely me and my husband and Dr. K, who was the doctor at Plastic and Hand Surgical Associates in South Portland, who did great work on my face. So in late January of 2016, when the cabin, my writing cabin, sat empty among snowdrifts, I'd visited our family doctor for a winter ritual, the freezing off of a sun-damaged spot. I was 67, a pale white person prone to sunburn. As a teenager, I'd slathered myself with baby oil, equating good looks with a rosy tan. I'd ridden my bike hell-bent, I'd played tennis, I'd been a lifeguard at an outdoor pool, and burned and bubbled and peeled. That particular January's routine cryoing was different from previous ones. For several weeks before, a white tidbit, the size and texture of a freshwater pearl, had appeared within the corona of sun damage. It was growing, though hardly noticeable, in the scheme of a face. I might have ignored it had the routine appointment not already been scheduled. Just to be safe, the doctor's assistant cut out the pearl and sent it to the lab. A few stitches, then a Band-Aid. 3 days later, she called with the biopsy results. Malignant melanoma in situ, lentigo maligna melanoma, perineural invasion. A lifelong worshiper of words, I felt like a beetle on the pin of phrases I couldn't fathom, except to know they conjured a host of troubles. Within a few hours, Nate, that's my husband, and I were sitting at Plastic and Hand Surgical Associates. I on the exam table, he in a padded metal chair. Dr. K explained exactly what needed to happen and why. He was young enough to be our son. His news was bad. Few details registered except that he and a surgical oncologist would operate together. Dr. McGee's arena was metastasis. After radionuclide dye was injected into the tumor and traced to the lymph node it drained to, he'd remove it for biopsy. Then Dr. K would take over. His job to excise a chunk of my cheek. That too would be biopsied. It's algorithmic, he said, when I asked how he knew how much flesh to remove. The goal was 10 millimeters of clean margin all around. At the end, he'd cover the site with a graft. Putty-faced and lined with worry, Nate looked older than his 74 years. But then he leaned forward and asked in his disarming way, "So will you use pigskin?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. Aghast, Dr. K frowned at us both. "It's not funny," he said. "It's very serious." I nodded, feeling chastened, as if Nate and I, two junior high cut-ups, had pranked the student teacher. Yet there was something beyond our nerved-up foolishness I needed him to understand. "It's how we handle serious things," I said. A week after Dr. K operated, he snipped off the surgical bolster sewn over the graft to protect it from shearing off should I bump it or roll over by mistake while asleep. "Your facial sculpture," an artist friend called it. To me, it looked like a yellow patty pan squash. Underneath the bolster, my new cheek, taken from my shoulder, was concave and stained deep blue with tracer dye. A saucer, a caldera, I described it, a crater on the moon.
Thanks, Kate. So I wonder if you would like to talk a little bit about how this book happened. And since you write both fiction and memoir, I wonder if it ever occurred to you to fictionalize the experience that you went through, or whether that was ever in your mind. And if not, maybe the book just always wanted to be what it is. But could you talk a little bit about that, and also
Yeah, absolutely.
a little bit, also a little bit about memoir itself and the hazards of memoir?
Okay, well, remind me if I forget some of that, Al.
No, okay.
During this whole experience, I kept what I called day books, which made me feel like a real artist, a real writer. And what I did was take notes about what was happening, the appointments I had, how I was feeling, what it was like at home, what I noticed in the natural world, the change of seasons. And all of that went into these notebooks. I never intended for them to be a book. Writing was really and is a way for me to keep myself steady and involved in the world, in this case, kind of to save my life. And it didn't matter how well it was written, it was just getting it down. Afterwards, when this whole thing was done and I'd had time to sort of shake myself out a bit, maybe about a year, I typed up all of those notebooks feeling very writerly. And then I decided, maybe this could turn into a book. I'd never written memoir before. It wasn't something I had a burning desire to do, but what I had to offer in a memoir of this type was really someone who went through this experience, sort of a hapless, every woman type, kind of a Gulliver's Travels, how I thought about it, navigating the world of cancer and trying to be as absolutely honest as I could, which sometimes made me look less than heroic and certainly very unheroic, going through so many of the feelings of anger and real fear, claustrophobia, all kinds of things. So in a novel, you can make stuff up, and that was kind of a hard master here to not make it up. But I tried.
Yeah, but that's part of what I loved about the book, is that you weren't heroic, and there were moments when you were really losing it, and really worried about the people around you, and in terror, and feeling loss and angry that your life was taken over by cancer, and such a wide range of emotions, and you describe those so beautifully in the book, and so faithfully to what was real. And I just
Thank you, Eleanor.
really admired. It's not easy to do that, and to let that less lovely part of ourselves show, but it made you all the more real.
Well, I'm not a huge reader of memoir, and I was not a big reader of cancer memoirs. I think I read maybe one or two, but I felt that the writers were doing kind of a disservice to the reader, and certainly by someone who went through a cancer experience, to not paint it as it was. And maybe there are people who are upbeat the entire time, but I find those people few and far between.
Well, they're kind of annoying if they are.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Did you have a sense of it being a risky book to write?
Well, that's such a good question, Eleanor. Risky ego-wise, I would say. When I told people that I was writing a memoir about cancer, I kind of cringed to myself because I thought, oh God, who's going to want to read that? It's just bathos and pathos and everything in between. But I kind of got over that. And blessedly, Literal Press was willing to publish this little tome, tiny tome. And so that felt really good. It felt wonderful, in fact. But once I told our family doctor what I was doing in my kind of embarrassed sort of way, sort of apologizing from it, he said, oh, I get it. and he treated me in a very serious way and says, "What you're doing is you're swallowing the beast." And I said, "Yes, that's right. That's absolutely right." I had a hard time letting go of cancer when my treatments were finished from all the doctors and everybody else, the radiation. I didn't feel done. I wasn't finished, and I wasn't sure how to be finished. And writing this was one way, certainly not the only way. People have all kinds of ways if they're lucky enough to be in remission, as I am, they can feel semi-done with it in a variety of ways.
Yeah. You and I talked a little bit about how, well, in reading this, it feels as though the book, I mean, certainly the book is about a harrowing event, and but it's also connects to just about anybody who has a sudden unexpected calamity that takes over a life. And
Like now.
yes, exactly. So I mean, everybody here, and it's great that you're all here, but everybody here has experienced this sudden unexpected calamity at the beginning of 2020. We never could have imagined where we are now. And so your book is very timely in that sense of how in the heck do you cope with that, the sense of loss and the sense of normality, and being overtaken by isolation and losing one's focus. That's all in your book, and it's all things that we as humans all over the world are experiencing right now. And I'm just wondering how you see that connection yourself.
Well, at the beginning of our sequestration, or whatever you want to call it, the beginning of the pandemic, I felt, oh, this feels kind of familiar. Not in obvious ways, but in ways I was used to staying at home for almost a year. I pretty much stayed at home either because I was recovering from some procedure, a graft or radiation or surgery. And also part of the time, this face of mine, which doesn't look so bad now, it looks pretty good, was a kind of a neon red and sort of a pulsing, hideous thing. I didn't feel it was right to foist it on the world, and I was not at all ashamed of it, but I just didn't want to put it out there and make people feel sad or concerned. Once I went to the post office to mail Christmas packages, and there was a long line. This was in December, so almost exactly a year after, and my face was still pretty pulsating. And there was an acquaintance that I knew and didn't ever really like much, but she said in this very loud voice in the South Portland post office, "What happened to your face?" And everybody whipped around. They have their packages in their arms, and it's like, oh my God. And I felt like apologizing to people for having them thrust into the middle of this conversation that they had not asked for. So what was your question?
Oh no, you did. No, you answered it about the connection with the pandemic. But I remember you saying you didn't want to scare small children too.
Exactly. In the produce section at Hannaford's, I did not want to scare small children. And the other thing I connected with, well, two things. One was fear at this weird virus that we couldn't see or touch. And the other was having the rules keep constantly changing. We'd be in lockdown and then we wouldn't be. And that's very much like the cancer experience. If you have a recurrence, you're always waiting for the other shoe to fall. I don't feel that way now, but I certainly did then. And that has echoes for me very much now. Oh, and the election.
Those extremities.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, do you want to go off on another tack? You don't need to hear me about the election, but
do you want to talk about the election?
well,
It's okay.
it has to do with writing memoir. So we're sort of circling
Yeah.
back to your question
Yeah.
about memoir. I was pretty shocked that I left out huge chunks of my lived experience during the time that this book takes place. For example, I left out the election of 2016, kind of a big thing, the election, the aftermath. And there were many other things. I mentioned family. I wrote very little about how wonderful it was to see family, have them come visit, and it felt so normal, and they were so beautiful, and that was a very wonderful thing. But I really narrowed the lens down, the focus. Tolstoy has a wonderful phrase. He said, a work of art needs to have a focus, either a point from which all the light rays are issued or which they go toward. I'm mangling it a bit, but the point is that there was a focus. And I really thought about that also in terms of having radiation, which was very focused, literally.
The true beam.
The true beam was the name of the radiation machine. Yeah.
I talked a little bit about the honesty of the emotional part of the book, and the loss, grief, and fear were very palpable. And I mean, the humor is very much there too. But when I've had really bad patches in my life, I'm thinking of a year when my mother died and my 28-year marriage ended and my father died all in one calendar year. And I felt as though I found myself on a different planet, that people were living their lives and they were kind of going ahead with whatever they were doing. And I felt as though I would spoil things if I tried to connect with people, that I was in such a grief-stricken, sort of chaotic state that I felt the need to isolate and just to kind of protect myself, but also felt like I was protecting other people. So there was a kind of built-in isolation with that grief and loss. And I wonder if you want to talk anything about how this experience changed or affected your closest relationships.
Yeah. Well, it certainly did with you, Eleanor. We can start with that because you were in England, London, for when I was having radiation, and you even asked me, would you like me to stay? And I know you meant it, but there really wasn't anything that you could do. And you and I had a lot of email back and forth. And I remember we had a phone conversation. And the next day you wrote me this kind of stricken email apologizing for rattling on, as you expressed it, about Victorian plumbing and that kind of thing when I was going through this experience. And it wasn't that I did want to hear about it. I just didn't. I was kind of like that. And my friend Mary Cushman, I don't know if she's here or not, but she sent me
Yes, she is.
Oh, she is. Hi, Mary. She sent me a very wonderful email saying we'd had breakfast together at Becky's on the waterfront, and she had said, I felt
I have
terrible.
it right here. You want me to
Oh,
read
you do? Oh, yeah. Let me see.
Mary wrote, I felt you on another plane, not because of anything you did at all, but because of the damn cancer, which is a separator of the first order. I can't find you, which makes me wild and furious and sad. It's such a beautiful statement of how it can separate, and any kind of huge grief or fear or loss, but your experience did have that effect, and it was painful for those of us who care about you and know you well, and it must have been equally painful for you.
Oh, It was really hard on my husband, Nate, who I haven't even said this yet, but he had two quite serious illnesses while I was going through cancer. He had anaplasmosis phagocytophilum, which is it's kind of like Lyme disease, but not Lyme disease, and also West Nile fever from a mosquito bite. And he had been so great for and with me, and I just couldn't seem to rise to the occasion to be as supportive of him as I wished I could be. And that was painful. I mean, it wasn't a huge deal, but I felt angry, and I'm not someone who goes around shouting a lot. I might be better off if I did, but I felt really angry, and I targeted it toward people who reached out to me and wanted information about how I was doing, but didn't really give information about their lives. And I was really mean and called this group the love and light crowd. They were full of giving me love and light, but not offering to come and clean the bathroom or bring a meal. And I felt extremely judgmental about that and kind of mean, but it also felt good to just exercise that. If that makes sense, Elle.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that I mean, those of us close to you and close to anybody who's going through something like what you went through are changed by it. And I was aware of that while you were going through what you did, and also after that. I had a new connection to life and death, and that my own sense of mortality was heightened as a result of what you'd been through. I think, I mean, obviously, I've always known that I'm going to die someday, or as an adult anyway, but it doesn't feel real. But given the danger that you were in, it made all of us more vulnerable. And that sense of you as an anchor person being vulnerable changed my sense of vulnerability too. And I imagine that was true for just about everybody around you. And
yeah, I would think so. I know it was really hard on family, because it was there wasn't much people could do, but we were lucky we could visit back then, see each other.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, which surprised me in retrospect, I didn't cry during this. Maybe once or twice I did. And I am somebody who cries. I cry, as our daughter Rachel and Nate know. We're all criers at movies, and I didn't cry during this experience. It was so scary that I couldn't afford to give in to that. And it isn't that I didn't feel sad, but it was that letting down, which I think is something I learned from my mother, who, after her beloved husband of many, many years died, I never saw her cry. And that was, I think, pretty profound in how I reacted. And I also took a whole lot of strength from how I'd seen her go through various experiences too. So, but strange, huh?
But it makes sense too that you can't afford to lose it, because you just go right down to the bottom at that point, to hold something. I wanted to turn to something that's really important in your book, and that's another wonderful thing about it, that what you experienced is really balanced by the natural world. The natural world is a very significant, almost a character in your book, that the birds and growing things and Lulu the dog, and it's interesting. I mean, this is another connection with the pandemic. I've heard a lot of people talk in the last 9 months about how the natural world has saved us, and in some ways, and when it just gets to be too much to go outdoors. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and what that meant to you in the writing and what it means to you, period.
Well, my geographical world was pretty darn tiny during this time. As I said, I almost spent most of my time at home. We have 2 beautiful acres of land, which was a lucky place to be. And I spent a lot of time in my writing cabin, which is also kind of an animal, natural world viewing place. It's a tiny cabin that Nate built for me. So I spent a lot of time observing the world, and I'd say it taught me many things. One of them was that, I'm not the only living thing going through something, which was, we had a goldfinch that one day kept hammering against a front window, and it kept happening day after day. And I thought, my gosh, this thing's it's gonna kill itself or smash the window or something. And I didn't understand it at all, and kind of wrung my hands about it. But that was good, because I got involved in caring for that goldfinch a little, maybe for a few minutes, not thinking about myself. I was pretty self-absorbed during this time. Let me read something about spring coming. Is that all right, Elle?
Of course. Yeah. Read whatever you like.
Okay. I'm in mid-May, I was waiting for another biopsy report after a surgery. Each mid-May, as if on schedule, I lose my head, a form of spring fever, only bigger. Because the chance of a cancer recurrence seemed remote, spring giddiness came upon me that year too, at least for discrete green pods of time. I'd feel hectic unfurling and budding and vining in my veins, the desire to nuzzle compost, to buy a pastel dress. I'd finished teaching an online class. The second edition of my book had appeared in bookstores. The writing cabin was open for business. It's seasonal. Like me, our dog Lulu was free and clear too. During warm afternoons, Nate and I left the sliding glass door onto the deck unslid and the corral gate ajar. She tore down the hill to the creek and fell in love with a mallard pair splashing in one of the ponds. We shooed her, or tried to shoo her, but the sweet, swindling air and the daffodils and the bleeding heart, I just let them be. And later, admiring a new rhubarb fist or a hairy shoot of oriental poppy, I'd say, my, look at you. I think now, many seasons later, how against nature it must have felt for Dr. K to deliver such news as he delivered on the most glorious day since time began. I'm sorry, he said, I had melanoma again. So both of these things, they coexist in a way.
Mm-hmm. And bring reality and balance to each other. I read something this year. I wrote it down today. This is from Bill Holm, The Music of Failure. He said there are 2 eyes in the human head, the eye of mystery and the eye of harsh truth. And what you just read reminds me of that. That's
wonderful.
Yeah, I really like it too.
Yeah. Wow.
But the mystery in what happens in the natural world and the ineffability of it and the eye of the harsh truth that you were experiencing every day for over a year. And but the book was really enlarged by what you wrote about the natural world and about all the creatures and things that happened in that world. And it was, I mean, not only do you write about it beautifully, but it also brought that balance, which I know is in you, and really came into the book. And I loved some of the passages about Lulu, trying to protect you, but not wanting to go into the cabin, being frightened. And it's just, there's so many beautiful passages in the book. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, and this is another great thing about the book that I loved, the unexpected people that you met along the way, the people in, doctors, and Nate meeting a woman whose daughter had a rare form of brain cancer, and the people in the waiting room that you got to know. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I became, I'd say, instantly attached to the people, especially in the radiation waiting room. There were 2 radiation machines, 2 true beams that were treating people who had all different kinds of cancers, prostate cancer and brain cancer and facial cancer. And I divided them into 2 groups because the group I was part of, the head and neck people, I call them, we didn't need to change our clothes to have radiation. I had a plastic mask that was molded to fit over my face. But I could keep on my street clothes. And the other group were the torso and limb people. And they had to wear hospital johnnies and white tube socks because they were receiving treatment for prostate cancer or colon cancer. And we had a camaraderie. There was not a lot of there was not a lot of deep substantive thought, but because we were going through the same thing together, there was no need for that. So I kept feeling that I was in a holy place, just chatting. Let me see if I can find about the woman early on.
The person in the waiting room that Nate was talking to?
No, the woman I met on sort of the second day, she talked about wishing she brought her crocheting while she was waiting. Okay. I talked to one fellow who was kind of turned into a pal because we met. Our appointments for radiation were scheduled at more or less the same time. So there would be a group who went before, 2 people who went before I went, and then someone who went at the time I went. And so unlike at plastic and hand surgical, where I never saw the same person twice, the radiation room, we got to see fellows, which I really loved and immediately glommed onto them. I glanced through piles of magazines, this is in the room while I'm waiting, on a side table without finding any of interest. The worst magazines, I've got to say. A woman about my age sitting nearby watched me and nodded. Her hair was gray, her skin was gray. I guessed she'd been at this a while. She turned to me. I wish I brought my crocheting. I wish I brought a book, I said. It's pretty hot for crocheting this time of year, isn't it? Oh, I do it out in the camper, she explained. She made it sound as if I knew the camper well, which somehow I did. We were neighbors, maybe, trading crochet patterns and crock pot recipes. Sometimes we played hearts. With the husbands, we made a foursome. She liked Sebago Lake State Park, so did he, but that particular summer, because of radiation, the camper sat up on blocks, parked in the dooryard in the shade of 2 white pines. Though I didn't know her name, her diagnosis, or chance of survival, and I never saw her again, the small talk we traded in that holy place felt as right and proper as the lighting of a candle or the laying of a wreath.
I love that. Kate, I'm just noticing that we're at 7:48.
Yeah, better open her right up.
So Jerry is collecting a few questions. So are you there, Jerry?
Jerry.
I am here. I'm trying to, let's see, I want to, Well, I'm trying to figure out how to spotlight myself again. And well, I'm just going to ask the questions.
Well, maybe you can find a way to see yourself.
I'll figure it out. So Mariana from Asheville, North Carolina asked, you mention your family frequently. What is it like to write about your family?
That's my sister. I kind of put her up to it. And Mariana, in fact, is a character in this book. I didn't read the sections involving her, but she was kind of where my thinking about radiation all started. Because when she was an infant or toddler, she had radiation treatments for a condition that, in fact, nowadays would be considered not a problem. And this had influenced well, I don't know the public health terminology, but it didn't cause the cancers, but it helped them along. Maybe she had several different kinds of cancers. And I was very struck at her suffering and also the irony that she was treated for something. So when I went in to have radiation, I was, you can imagine, very leery of the whole thing. Writing about family, you need to think about how people will react. At least I do. There are plenty of memoirists who don't particularly, who are braver maybe, or have an axe to grind with family. There are many memoirs like that. I did not have an axe to grind with anybody in my family, nor do I now. And for my stepchildren and granddaughters, I felt like it was an invasion of their privacy to write any length about them, although they were so important in my healing and carrying on. My husband, Nate, and the daughter we have together, Rachel, I felt they were fairer game. But it's very tricky, very tricky. I wrote quite a bit about Mariana and my mother, and that was really quite wonderful because I had tried to write a book, was in the middle of writing a book when this cancer story happened in my own life. And that book sort of went kablooey because I couldn't concentrate. So I kind of weaseled my mother in there. I didn't do it exactly purposely, but she entered into that. My wonderful brother who died, his widow Suzanne is here tonight. He had already died by the time my story began. So it didn't really seem relevant, as with my father, who was a great guy, but he wasn't alive. He died much before this happened. So does that answer the question, Mariana? Maybe not. Oh, well.
Well, we have a few more. Phil from Chapel Hill, North Carolina asked, to what extent did survivalist questions, for example, life after death, come up for you?
Well, that's a great question, Phil, and a difficult one. I am not someone who exactly believes in an afterlife. My thinking is very mushy and formless, I have to say. I don't believe in a Christian heaven, but I'm not sure I'm ready to believe that nothing, we turn into just a poof or a piece of dirt or an ash. So I don't know. I feel quite unformed in that arena. But I certainly did think that I might die during the course of this. And I did not think about an afterlife. It was more the suffering that I would undergo and the suffering it would cause my family was how it came to my friends. That's how it came to me.
Thanks.
Kind of a weenie of an answer, Phil, but.
Marcia from Los Altos, California. And
Hi, Marcia and I went to college together.
she asks, what is your advice about how to best to support people going through something like you experienced? And you kind of touched on that, but did you want to be left alone or have friends reach out to you?
Well, Marcia, that's a great question because everybody's different. Everybody who has cancer is different. And some people love being reached out to. I really appreciated emails and calls, but I couldn't really respond to them. I was so tired and sometimes in pain, although I did not have terrible pain. I had annoying, sapping kind of pain. So I think it really is a matter of what the other person wants. And I think it's fair game to ask. People who brought food, that was that was wonderful. People who didn't ask to stay and get all the inside track, that was very wearing to tell my story over and over again. I didn't especially like visitors unless they were very close in people. And I had this rant in the book about the love and light crowd, offer to clean the bathroom or the kitchen or sweep or do something physical and don't ask me to hang around and talk. And again, that sounds very harsh. It had to do with energy, and it's painful if you're going through something to have to tell it over and over again. Yeah. Although for some people, that's very cathartic. So I'd say ask the person, how can I support you?
Nancy Walters made a comment that she hopes your doctors have copies of Skin in their waiting rooms and info about the book for interested patients. She said she had a different type of cancer and searched endlessly for writing from others who had been through it at the time.
Oh, that's great. I've given copies to all my doctors and only one of them has read it, which I understand. Suzanne, my sister-in-law, helped me understand that many doctors do no reading outside of articles in their field for forever, kind of their whole working life. So, and many have young children, so it's a bit unrealistic, but I would love the book to get into medical schools in their programs in narrative medicine now, which help doctor trainees and doctors to tell their own stories so that it's kind of a bridge to their patients.
That would be such a terrific book for that.
I think
it's so clear.
It's certainly in your face emotional. Yeah.
And another question from Alice Meadows. Can you say in a sentence or two what you took away from the cancer experience, and what do you want others to understand from your experience?
Oh, wow, Alice, that's the hardest question yet. Thank you, though. I felt that it was an experience that many, many people go through in some way or another. And I felt it gave me some added empathy for those going through it. I don't see it as something that helped build my soul or improved me. I don't view illness that way. But it certainly has changed my view of people and vulnerabilities and how fragile life is and how valuable our connections are to friends and family. And how incredibly lucky we are here in the Portland, Maine area. We have some great doctors.
Kate, one of the things that we didn't talk about was what happens after and how hard it was for you to get back. You said in the book, maybe I'd never return to the self I used to be, but how you came back to the world. I felt that was a really honest part of the book, that you know, people sometimes expected you to be back sooner than you were ready to be back.
Yeah, and I wanted to be back for their sake, not to mention my own, but it took me quite a while to not want to just blab about cancer all the time. And people, it's like anything. If you experience a death, it takes you a long time to have anything else to say, if it provided you can talk about that. And I felt that with my cancer experience. I even, when the doctors were done, there was a whole lot that I needed to do. I referred to myself as the general contractor for what I needed to have happen in my own healing. And I wanted to find people who looked like me. People, I call them skin kin, people who not necessarily have a funny cheek, but people whose faces, getting back to what Eleanor first started with, that wonderful quotation about unruly faces. I wanted to just hang out with people who were more like me, who had been abducted by an alien spaceship and returned to Earth with some kind of marking, and were looking for others of their own kind. And I found one of those, it's the one at Hannaford's. I kept having things happen at the supermarket. And hair salons I found were a place where the stylists and barbers would find people with head and neck cancers, which I had never remotely thought of. But oh, sure, that happens all the time. When they're washing someone's hair, they may find a melanoma on a scalp or something like that. But here, I was drawn to others with altered faces, whether from cancer, stroke, or accident. I'd been abducted by aliens, it felt like, then returned to Earth to wander, seeking my own kind. People of the face, skin kin. I recognized them by their distinctive markings. A gauze pad on the forehead, like Eleanor had for a while. A gash like the Dream Girls, a lip rearranged. One day at the supermarket deli counter, I saw such a one and walked toward her as if magnetized. Her mouth jutted to the side. Something must have been cut out. Mouth tissue, teeth, a portion of jawbone, I wasn't sure. I wondered about asking. Then again, that was wildly intrusive. And in fact, I didn't care about her answer, just her presence near me. We stood side by side, gazing at blocks of cheese. She held number 9, I held 10. Service was slow. We agreed we didn't mind. Groceries were expensive these days, but we paid anyway. At that, we shook our heads, clucking ruefully. When number 9 was called, my countrywoman asked for ham, and when shown a particular thickness, said, "That's fine," though it wasn't what she had asked for. "The boys will eat anything," she added, just as they galloped up. "Grandsons," I gathered. She smiled, a lovely crooked smile. I remembered the woman at outpatient radiation who'd wished she had her crocheting to do while she waited, and how our conversation then, as simple as this one, had felt like hallowed ground.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's 8:02, I just realized.
It is 8:02, and there are a few more questions. Here's an interesting one to end up with, and it's Patricia Hudson asks, in what ways do you think this experience will impact your writing in the future?
Patricia's a former student of mine, wonderful writer herself.
Great, very, very good question. Thank you. Well, as many of us are struggling with being able to concentrate, to focus on one thing and not be in a dither about whatever it is we're in a dither during this COVID and election season. I'm not sure what I'm going to write next. I think because I'm a different person than I was before the cancer, not better or worse, just different. I think it will affect me. I'll have to think about that some more.
Okay.
I realize that we haven't shown the book itself. Were you about to do that, Jerry?
Yes, I was. Thank you. Now, if you hold it up, I can say, Skin a Memoir is available at a few local bookstores, Print a Bookstore in Portland, and also Non-Such Books in South Portland. And it's also available through Literal Press, a small press based in Portland, Maine, which was founded in 1975 by members of the Portland Women's Group for the purpose of publishing women Maine writers. And it went into hibernation in 76, but 43 years later, in 2018, renewed its publication. And it is now committed to publishing quality books in a variety of genres by writers of all genders from Maine and New England. Thank you, Agnes and Jim, who are here. And thank you both for just amazing conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Jerry.
Just been wonderful.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, Kate, for this spectacular book.
Well, thank you, Elle. It was just wonderful to talk to you in this semi-formal way. I'm used to sitting in your living room talking about writing by your wood stove, just the two of us. Well,
I'm so glad that, I'm so glad everybody came. Wonderful to have you here. Next time, maybe we'll be in person.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Well,
Thank
thank
you
you so
all.
much, everybody.
Yes. Be well and take care, everyone.
Yeah, you
Take
too.
care of each other. Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Rachel.
Whenever everyone's safe.
Nathan, Meg, Betsy. Thank you so much, everybody. It's you may well be zoomed out, but this is what we have to offer.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.